Great, thanks, Katrina. All right, welcome everyone. I'm Lorene Kamalu, currently chair in the Indigent Defense Commission. We have a great group for our meeting today. Thanks, Katrina, and so many for helping to get us organized to be able to get together virtually.
Oh, you got the phone.
So the date is November 18th. It is 2:10. There are some in the anchor location, and then others that we're all joining in a hybrid meeting virtually. So let's just go around and state names of everyone who's here. And let's start maybe with the commissioners, the ones who I can see on my screen. Looks like, Mary, you want to share who you are? You can get unmuted, sorry. Okay, well, maybe she's not getting unmuted, but Mary. Then Michael Drexel.
Hi, everyone. This is Michael Drexel from the Administrative Office of the Courts. Nice to see you all.
And Judge Zimmerman.
Good afternoon.
Good to see you, Ryan.
Ryan Lewis from League of Cities and Towns as commissioner.
Great. Mary, now we see you.
Yes, yes. Mary Corporon here.
Wonderful. Rich.
Rich Morrow. Is that echoing?
Tiny bit, but it might not be horrible.
All right.
Yeah. Pam, good to see you. Go ahead and share who you are.
Sorry, I'm late.
No problem. Pam Vickery, Commissioner. Then let's see. We got you, right, Ryan? Yeah. Tom.
Tom Ross, CCJJ. It's good to be here.
Good. And I think that's all the commissioners, right, Katrina? And then we have IDC staff. I think so. Yeah. Okay. And
Margaret's here too.
oh yeah, Margaret, there you are. You're in the middle of my screen. Who are you, Margaret?
Margaret Lindsay, Utah County Public Defenders.
Yeah, very good. Thank you so much. All right. First item of business on the agenda is the review and approval of the minutes from our last meeting. And I have read them and definitely appreciate these minutes. Thank you for preparing them. Anyone else who's been able to review? And if so, I'll be ready for input or a motion.
Tom Ross, I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes as submitted.
I'll second.
All right, the second was Ryan Luce. Very good. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Great. Anyone opposed? All right, unanimous approval of minutes. Thank you so much. Let's see, we have, the next item is commissioner transitions. Now, is that just sharing the name of the new one, Matt? Okay, great. Well, since I'm on my laptop and don't have a double screen and didn't print it, Matt, help us know who is the next commissioner who's been appointed by the legislature.
His name is Representative Lund. He's out of Sanpete County. So he'll be joining the commission now that Representative Ferry is transitioning off. Representative Ferry was appointed to some new assignments in the House, and so he felt that it was a good time for him to hand it off to another representative. And so Representative Lund was appointed on Monday. So that might explain why he's not here today, is because it was a pretty quick turnaround from Monday to today. But he's from Sanpete County, used to be on the Sanpete County Commission. So he is intimately aware of some of the challenges that the different counties face. And so I think he'll be a really valuable addition to the commission.
Wow, that's great. I didn't know he was previously a county commissioner. Wonderful. Very good. Well, it sounds like there was some thoughtful discussion and consideration of this spot, and I very much look forward to meeting him. He's not one that I know. Has anyone else met this representative before? Oh, good. Michael Drexel has, and Tom Ross.
Yeah, I have, and I've known him for a while through his commission time.
Oh yeah, Adam, that makes sense. You would know him. Great. Wonderful. Well, we're just really glad to have another legislator involved, and look forward to, hopefully he'll be able to join in the next time and introduce himself. All right, number 4 on the agenda, Matt will share the fiscal year 2023 grant tier discussion. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. And Katrina, if you could allow me to share my screen, I will present a slideshow. Everybody loves slideshows.
You should be able to just go to the bottom of your screen and hover there and then share. In the meeting, everybody is able to share.
Okay, great. Screen sharing. All right. Very good. Can everybody see that okay?
Looks good.
All right.
Yes.
So what I'm presenting right now is the staff's proposal for how we will be prioritizing the grant applications for the coming fiscal year. And so what we've done is relied in large part on the discussion that was had last year with the commission. Back in October of last year, there was a very robust discussion about how we should prioritize our applications, and the consensus was to prioritize the managing defender program and building capacity that way, and building from there. So in the coming year, well, and this is a summary of last year's priorities. We structured a tiered system to address those requests. Tier 1 would be and was managing defender capacity, so prioritizing that first and foremost. Tier 2 was looking at managing defender capacity in smaller systems. So that would usually be a single system rather than a regional type system with more than one county joining forces. And then tier 3 was all other requests that fell outside those 2 priorities. So mileage, social workers, defense resources. So last year we were able to fully fund tier 1 and tier 2 requests. And then we were able to also fund some additional requests that fell under that 3rd tier, specifically mileage for rural counties. And then all other requests were not able to be funded under that system. So what we are proposing here for the upcoming fiscal year is similar to what we proposed last time and what was authorized last time. Tier 1 would be renewals of what was funded last year. Tier 2 would be continued emphasis for managing defender capacity increases. In other words, that would be for systems that have yet to participate in having a managing defender. What we've done differently this year, and we'll go through these in turn, but we've created a 2A tier to build upon the capacity increases for systems which already have a high quality management structure. And then tier 3 is all other requests. So we'll go through these one by one. This is kind of a roadmap for the discussion. And something that we're also suggesting to do differently is to separate from the tiered considerations some priorities that we would fund separately that recognizes some special needed resources that would fall outside of the tier system. So again, with tier 1 renewals, these are giving emphasis to grants that have been awarded in the past. And so those would get our top priority. That will help to maintain continuity from year to year. And so there wouldn't be any gaps in service for those systems. Tier 2 would be to build upon the managing defender capacity increases. So again, these are for systems that do not have managing defenders. And we're also defining that as being eligible for juvenile court systems in second-class systems where their juvenile system is large enough that they could use a managing defender to help with that capacity. This would also include new administrative assistants if they don't have a grant-funded administrative assistant, as well as attorneys to reduce the managing defender caseload. So this would only apply to managing defenders who have not previously been awarded an additional attorney to help reduce that caseload. And if anybody has any questions about any of this, please feel free to jump in. So tier 2A, so this is recognizing the systems that already have a robust and established managing defender system could benefit from some more resources and have the capacity to really use those resources efficiently and well. And so that's where this tier 2A system comes in, or priority comes in. And so what that would include would be the social worker piece, or additional attorneys, specifically attorneys who are specialized. And so we would give priority to these systems that have that managed, the established managing defender structure. And will have demonstrated that they are meeting their goals, they're participating well, they're giving us feedback and responding to the requests for data, so that we know that if they are approved for these additional resources, the social worker, additional attorneys, that we'll be able to measure and see how these additional resources are being used. And the way that we'll be able to determine which systems are eligible for this tier 2A funding, it would be through their system needs evaluations that are conducted annually. So one question that we have for the commission in determining this would be where the cutoff would be for the system needs evaluation. So this next graph will explain that. So this is a graph that was created by Leslie, and what this is this is from last year. Every year we conduct a systems needs evaluation with each system where they respond to a questionnaire that helps us to know how they are, what their needs are as a system, and how they're complying with the core principles of the Indigent Defense Commission. So as you can see, there are certain counties who either did not respond or are not participating in the grant program, and so that's where you can see that they're at the 0 as of last year. And then these other counties here are the ones that are participating in, and that are reporting back on their system needs evaluations, that they're in good compliance with the core principles, that they're paying attention to what they need to be doing to provide efficient and effective criminal defense. Now, there is, full disclosure here that these numbers are largely self-reported, and so that may affect where a system lands on the scale here. Also, as I mentioned, this particular graph was from last year's system needs evaluation, and so we'll be updating that in January. And so the graph may look a bit different. In fact, there's some here at the 0 who we would anticipate would have much higher scores than that. But it appears that there is kind of a natural cutoff right around 70%, where you can see that those counties are kind of clustered up there and are doing well and could be eligible for the additional resources through that Tier 2A proposal. And Leslie, you're present. If there's anything that you want to add here on this chart or this regarding the system needs evaluation, please jump in.
Matt, now that we've seen that chart, can you go back to 2A, one slide, and just let us see kind of what's contemplated again?
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
And what is on the SNE needs analysis, right? Something?
System needs
System needs analysis.
evaluation. Mm-hmm. Yep. And Leslie, do you want to speak to that? What is actually?
Yeah, definitely. So I can send you a PDF of the questions, but we went through them a little bit last year quickly, but it goes through each of our core principles and asks systems to answer, like, I mean, straight up, do you have a managing defender? What percentage of their time do they spend on their caseload? All the managing defender duties that we also that we talked about last year. So things like, do you do performance reviews? Are you a liaison to behavioral health systems in your system? Things like that are all the questions that we are calculating this percentage out of. The system needs evaluation also asks about specialization, about counsel of first appearance, just pretty much everything that appears on our core principles.
Yeah,
It may
that's
be
right.
impossible for us to answer this at this point, but I'm just wondering if we were to pursue this with Tier 1 and Tier 2 and money that's been available, how much money do we even anticipate being left for 2A consideration? Do we have any sense of that? I mean, are we talking a few $100,000? Are we talking millions of dollars?
So I'm going to refer that one to Adam. So Adam was tasked with preparing our budget, our ask for the upcoming fiscal year, which was sent up to the governor's office about the Friday before I started. So I somehow missed all of that, but Adam was instrumental in getting that done. So I'm going to put him on the spot for that question.
No, that's fine. We asked for an additional, I think it was 1.7, approximately 1.7 million for, excuse me, for increases in the general IDC funding. And we asked for $1 million to increase for pellet work to meet our basic needs there. And the 1.7 was what we asked for because it was the approximate amount of the additional requests we had, funding requests we had for last year that we were not able to cover. So we asked for that number, but Michael, as you know very well, it's entirely uncertain what we'll get. Governor's office has always been supportive. I'm sure that Tom will help a lot. And the reality is we'll just have to keep working to see what we end up with. But I think we asked for a reasonable amount and it wasn't going too far. What we will have left for these kinds of 2A requests, it's really, really hard to say. I would think we have some amount, but if it's hundreds of thousands, I'd be really surprised by the time we got to this level. But then again, we've got the tier 3 requests too, which is part of the issue. Will we have anything more left over for those? That's also maybe even more pressing. But I will say, as we all know from working with the legislature, despite the $600 million additional money, we don't have anything available for anything else. So we'll have to make do, I guess. Sorry, that's a joke.
Just comment to that. We'll know, it looks like the governor's office, we've got a meeting that's called on December 6th, Monday. And I don't know if Matt, or if that's to you guys as well. It may just be the executive directors in certain agencies. I don't know, but at 10 o'clock over in the Capitol, we'll get our first look at what the governor's budget has included, which still requires, obviously, as everyone knows, the legislature to ultimately approve that as well. So
that really, Michael, I think that's as clear as we can be right now.
Well, and I appreciate that. It seems like trying to define what X should be in that second to last line, what percentage, where the cutoff ought to be, is really going to be contingent on how much money is available in this tier, especially if the commission votes to approve, renewals as tier 1 requests and dedicate all whatever funding we do get, a portion of it, a significant portion of it, into existing obligations. The percentage is going to get narrowed down pretty quickly, I think, just by the funding constraints, available funding.
And I too have a little question right here. So this is based on self-reporting, but I'm sure that the staff works enough with these jurisdictions that they have a sense for, how accurate it is, right? I see, Matt. Yeah, I mean, and it seems like in the time that I've been a commissioner, the staff has really been able to get to know these different systems quite well, which is so helpful.
hey, Lorraine, can I ask a question?
Oh, for sure.
So Matt and Adam and others, does everyone know that their responses can be determining whether they're getting any additional funding, or is this going to be something that we still have to educate them on, or maybe even, which I think would be the worst, we just roll it out based on what people have provided and they don't even know that they need to be doing this in order to get additional funding? Does anyone answer that?
And that's a great question. Let me add on to that, because almost in the middle is Davis, who just is barely using a grant money of funding, right? Just barely started with it. And so they're not really ranked up in the better cluster, 60% there. And yeah, I'm super curious, wondering whether our managing defender filled that out or whether he had an assistant fill that out, and just what that really means. I would, as a commissioner in that county, a county commissioner, I would go in and learn a lot from that myself. So yeah, good question, Tom.
I can definitely, go ahead. I can definitely comment on this one. So on the first thing, so the system needs evaluation. We do it twice a year, but when we started it, which was last January, it was made very clear to the counties that this was part of their application. So they're aware and they understand that the answers they put down here directly relate to what sort of funding they get. In last year's is because it is a needs evaluation. And so it shows, hey, this is where your biggest areas of needs are. And then we're going to have a conversation about it. And that's going to lead to how our grants go. When it comes to the managerial duties, that was something new we came up with and we haven't pushed it as much as we could have. So that's something new that we would like to discuss more. And the system needs evaluation was almost a way of introducing people to that, of saying like, hey, here are all the things that you would be expected to do. How many of them are you doing? And I know for a lot of systems, that was actually a really useful self-review. Like Grand County especially went through and said, oh my gosh, we're not doing any of these things. We definitely need a managing defender. This is very clear to us now. And yeah, especially for Davis County, this was done so January, and they didn't even get their grant funds until July. So we definitely expect that a lot of these numbers will change and improve in this upcoming January.
That's helpful. Thank you. Michael Drexel, you put your hand up.
Oh, thank you. Maybe a related observation, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but it does seem like the systems that we have worked most closely with or that are receiving more IDC money currently are clustered on the right-hand side of the graph, right? And that those that we haven't been able to establish solid working relationships with or pour a lot of resources, otherwise IDC resources, into their systems are on the left side of the graph. So one of the things I wonder about, if there's any thought, is if we're talking about renewals and the people on the right-hand side of the graph are already receiving a lot of the money that would be subject to tier 1 renewal, and then we talk about pouring additional resources into those entities where they are performing well under the system, as it seems like it collects and concentrates a lot of the IDC money in existing systems that are already tapping into IDC money. Am I wrong about that? Is there a correlation there, or am I missing it?
Michael, I think so that relates back to the tier 2. So that's why this discussion is right here about tier 2A. So tier 2 would be giving priority to managing defenders in systems that are not engaged right now. So let's say that one of those counties here at the bottom end of the scale said that they wanted to come and get participate and get some grant money to establish a managing defender and an assistant. That would get priority over these tier 2A funding requests.
Okay, I appreciate you pointing that out. I couldn't remember specifically how the 2 was structured. That's helpful, Matt. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
One other thing to add on Tom Ross's former question about letting them know is I would say, right, whether or not we decide on what percentage should be the cutoff, I think we should definitely explain, if this is how the commission goes forward with it, that in tier 2A, your amount of funding will be determined based on how you answer the system needs evaluation. So I would definitely want to be clear with people up front about the relationship between those questions specifically on the system needs evaluation and the funding. I should have said answered that.
Yeah, repetition is a good thing, right? Because people juggle so many different responsibilities, and then when it comes around, might not remember exactly.
And even to that point, it's a balancing act between building up systems and supporting systems. Both are important. And as we're, even in the JRI side of all these conversations, and we're having discussions about where, obviously we need funding to be a part of this. It always comes back as to, how are you going to do that? And is it going to be grants? And are we going to get some money thrown and then you're going to pull it away and expect there's a lot of things that play into it. So I do appreciate, and it doesn't surprise me that you all have been thoughtful about making sure that it's at least as important that we're building up systems. And I would say expansion of indigent defense is probably even still the biggest priority, that we're still expanding it as long as the funds are there in the tier 1 and tier 2 to support that. And then we add additional things on. One other thing, I don't know if this title that you have, the tier 2A high quality management structure, this may just be an internal document that we are using. But if it's something that could be a public document, I would just suggest not using high quality as the verbiage and define what somebody must do in order to, I know that you've talked about that's going to be, that's in the instructions, but it almost sounds like if you don't meet it, you don't have a good quality program. And although this could be a higher quality, I think I wouldn't want anyone that's doing less to think that we're judging them as a poorer quality. You see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So that, whether that language is important or not, I at least wanted to put that out.
Well, thanks for the feedback. That's very helpful. And I would, one last thing on this graph before we continue. Again, because this is from last year, we do intend to bring this back to the commission when it's been updated in January and present that as well. So moving on to tier 3. So this would be lower on the priority list for funding. That would include social workers, additional attorneys for systems that have not qualified as that high quality or to be determined term for the higher performing management structure. And there's an asterisk there because there is a separate budget request to the governor for parental representation social workers. So we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. But if that does go through on that separate request, then that would be separate and apart from the grants here. And we would note too that we don't anticipate awarding any compensation increases in the coming fiscal year. Part of that is because there's just not enough information that we've gathered at this point to be able to award those in an equitable way. And that's more of a long-term discussion that we'll need to work on, which could be included in the upcoming strategic planning process. So aside from the tier system, we have identified some funding priorities that would be outside of that process. The first would be the case management systems. Currently, we're using Defender data for the systems. That has been paid for through a grant through the federal government, through the JAG program. Now that grant expires at the end of the fiscal year, so in June of 2022. So the question is, once that has been, that money is gone, we've decided, or we're suggesting that that's such an important part of what we do in collecting data that we want to fund the continuation of those case management systems, whether that's Defender data or whether that's a different system, through the grants, and give that a special priority outside of the tiered decision-making process. And along those lines, another source of funding that we feel is important to the IDC's mission is reimbursement for the county or the rural mileage, to encourage the attorneys to go see their clients who might be in jail or prison that involves some travel. We want to make sure that they are doing that and having that in-person contact with their clients. And so we want to make sure that they're being compensated for that, so that that's not a burden on them, especially in those rural areas where it can be, it can take some time to go and see those people. Then finally, another thing to consider is our defense resources. So this is a little bit outside of the tiered program. This is for investigators, experts, transcripts, conflict representation. These are other requests that are just so vital for defense work and for representation, effective representation, that we thought.
Coordinating very important effort, which has a beautiful, very special result.
Hey, Matt,
Yes.
this is Margaret. I wonder if as part of that, if we don't want to include perhaps a separate requirement for juvenile defense resources, so that it kind of the message gets sensed that we feel that, you know, it's not simply the criminal cases where these defense resources are important. It also is in juvenile delinquency and child welfare, where that also need to be, you know, looked at and allocated and expected.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that, Margaret, because, sorry, attack from a dog on the lap here, but he's also going to snort into the phone or the Zoom camera, so you guys can just listen to him snort at you. Sorry about that. Because when you're dealing, okay, seriously, dog, you have to go. I'm just so professional right now. When you're dealing with smaller counties that have those contracts budgeted or lumped together, sometimes what you'll hear the defense attorneys say is that those resource dollars are really dedicated for the adult criminal defense cases, and that if they request them on the juvenile cases, that they almost feel kind of discouraged for asking for them on the juvenile cases.
That is some really great feedback. I mean, that's definitely something that we don't want to overlook those needs and have those not being utilized. So thank you for that input. I think that's something we can definitely incorporate and tease those out so that those are dedicated for those needs. So this is why we have the board that we do, the commission that we do, is to have this kind of input. So thank you. One of the items here, as you can see, is that we do encourage the systems, the counties, to have in their own budget a certain amount of money dedicated to defense resources. So we do try to encourage them to recognize the importance of having that available to their defenders on their end, and then require that to be utilized before the IDC supplements that. So we did want to make that clear. There is a question of, you know, how much is enough for them to really feel like they're contributing to that. There is a lot of variation in budgets for the different systems. As you can see on the slide, they're all current grantees except Kane have appropriated at least $4,000 in their defense budgets towards defense resources.
Maybe a question on that, Matt. So I get what we're trying to accomplish here, because it does make sense. Do you know, so with Kane, is it just a money? So part of me looks at this and goes, this is right. Or you could do a formula where we pay such and such percent, 60%, county pays 40, or we pay 80-20. Which sometimes is easier, but either way, I get the value of doing this. Unless, I guess the question mark would come up in my mind if it's a county, especially someone newer, but in the IDC, but that's struggling to get going. A part of me feels like that may be when we want to help support the most. A little bit of the if you build it, they will come attitude, without having some safety so it doesn't just get abused. I get that. I don't know what your thoughts are and what Kane's situation is specifically.
Yeah, and I don't have that information right here. And that's why we have the question mark here, right? So this is a question that we, as a staff, we're grappling with, and so that's why we have that as a question mark rather than a period. And I think that the having it a percentage of the total budget might make sense, so that there is some flexibility for some of those smaller systems. If it's reflected that way, that might be the way to go. That's something that if the commission would like to have us kind of do the math on that, we can do that and come back and report on that as to where the systems are right now on their defense resources and how much they're appropriating based on their total expenditures on defense spending. We could, if that would be helpful in making that determination, we could certainly do that.
Yeah, I remember when I was a new commissioner, this was a question that I had, a new IDC commissioner, because I know how much our county puts into this, and it's substantial. And then the percentage of the total budget is helpful because, there's big differences in the revenues of the different counties and how they divvy it all up in a budget. But it's so helpful to know the counties that understand the importance of this indigent defense, and that there are decisions made for them to do their part, at those local levels.
And part of that is, part of what we're trying to do is to educate these different systems, and then also the attorneys themselves, that this is something that's available and this is something that should be utilized. So it's an awareness piece that, here's where you can use an investigator, here's where you should be using an investigator, and your system has designated a budget for that. So that's why this defense resource piece too is separate from the tier. It's emphasizing just how important it is to educate the systems and the attorneys there that this is something they should be doing. It's important enough that there's these separate funds that should be available for that.
And I don't, whether or not you do the work now or we see, going forward what the funding is going to look like, and it might be helpful at some point. But Lorraine and I were having a conversation. I'm going to use your conversation with me a little bit, Lorraine, where I think it is very applicable. She was talking to me about coming in as a new commissioner and not having any knowledge of how these things operate. And if you don't have an indigent defense program, or even a defense attorneys that are in your part of your commission or your county, or even interacting with your commissioners, you don't know what they should be doing, that's the biggest part of all this. I think when it gets eventually, as people build it out, is that there's a direct line between the purse string holders and indigent defense, similar to a county attorney would have a budget. I think there needs to be something like that. So to that point, I think a lot of our commissioners, and especially in our rural areas, they may not know a thing about indigent defense. So as we look to do this, I would rather see us be more of a support role. And then as we get a managing defender in and we're having these discussions with commissioners, get them to see the value of that collaboration. And then I think it's easier to talk about budgets. But when you don't even have a seat at the table or a line item, then it's probably someone down the system, a county attorney or someone that ultimately decides, what they're going to recommend. So anyway, I anything that can help build that in, I think should be part of what we're doing too.
Well, that's some great feedback. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and Tom's right. I don't know if I've even shared that in this group, but yeah, in a nutshell, even in a very functional county with a substantial budget, none of the 3 commissioners, past or present, had anyone reporting directly to the commission about indigent defense or to understand this. Once a year in budget meetings, the managing defender, who's been there and done a good job for a long time, well, since 2014, I understand, in that role. Once a year, they'd come in and this, in just a little bit of a 10 or 15 minute present something. And that's as much as we knew about indigent defense until we formed a criminal justice coordinating council and I became more involved. So yeah, that should give since we're one of the urban counties that is pretty well developed and hopefully not too problematic in this space, that gives you an idea of, the majority of counties and how much the commissioners know and understand this. Particularly because I don't know of any commissioner, in a county commissioner or council member in the entire state who is an attorney or has had background working in the system.
So that is our presentation. That's some excellent feedback there. And so what we would like from the commission going forward is whether you approve of the tiered system as outlined. We can certainly make some tweaks and adjustments based on the feedback that we've gotten today, especially with the juvenile defense resources, having that being a designated funding source. And then also we'll take back that feedback from Tom about not necessarily having a minimum expenditure by the county for the defense resources as well. I think that's a point well taken. Commissioner Drexel has his hand up.
Thank you, Matt. This goes back to something that Tom and others have referenced in earlier comments, and it's this idea of making sure that there's stability in this funding mechanism for local entities that are relying on it in a lot of ways for their system to function. But I also wonder if we do a disservice by making our number one tier always making it renewals, without some sense that we can't always renew what we've previously been funding if we're truly going to be growing the system over time, right? We can't, at a certain point, I think, isn't it a reasonable expectation that entities will recognize internally the value of having an indigent defense system operating well, and of their part in that, more fully recognize that, and then increase their ability to fund themselves so that we can move that funding to other places around the state that need kind of that injection or infusion of financing. So I worry that the longer, and we did this last year, I can't remember what we did the year before, but that we fund renewals as tier one, and that kind of, we fully fund those. we start to set the expectation that people can rely on this money for the long term. And maybe that's a disservice ultimately. I don't know the answer to this, and maybe it's worth commission discussion as to whether or not we should be, even if we fund it fully this coming year, starting to telegraph that can't always be the case, right?
Yeah, and I think that, you know, and part of why we're having it this way for now is we do need to get the proposals going and getting those requests out and so that we can start funding those for the upcoming fiscal year. But we do recognize and that issue in particular, and we're hoping that with the strategic planning upcoming in the near future, that can be something that we can address during that strategic planning session with the commission. Rich has his hand up.
Oh, I would agree. I think Michael has a good point, but I think we have to be careful. We are kind of at the precipice now of folks, you know, not wanting to participate because of the fear that their funding may get cut. And I think we do need to be careful. And, you know, Matt, I think you have a good point. That probably is something we need to think about as part of strategic planning. You know, I think if we're gonna set up a grant system that looks a little like a BJA grant or some kind of Department of Justice grant, where there's an expectation that it is time limited, I think we need to make that clear to people. And I don't know that we're there yet. You know, and I suppose in evaluating the renewal grants, I suppose the commission could always have discretion to deny a renewal grant if they didn't think it was really serving the purpose. But it's not a bad idea. I think we need to put a little more thought in it before we sort of start telegraphing to groups that take our money that, hey, you may not have that money someday. But I think it is a good idea to think about how we would do that if we are going to do it.
Chair, if I may, this has been kind of my thing from the beginning, from the standpoint of once the new money runs out, then we're either funding those we've always had, or we let them go and start funding new people to get their systems up to date. But we have no guarantees or anything that they'll keep the higher level that they've gotten to with the funding. So we're kind of in a catch-22, but and if we get cut, then like we did during COVID, then we're going to have to cut people, and we're always in this box. I don't know how we'll ever fund any cities because we're not funding any. I think we're funding 2 or 3 actually right now, or any of the other counties to bring their levels up unless we solve this problem.
Yeah, it's kind of a dilemma. Thank you. Tom, you had a hand up too.
Yeah, I'm glad that Mike raised it, but I'm also very sensitive to what Rich was saying, because now as we're going around with this JRI tour and we're talking about filling some gaps in the criminal justice system that are very obvious, some of it could be some one-time funding and may not even be general fund type things. We've got opioid settlement money. We have some JRI funding that's supposed to be going forward. Some of it's going to need to be ongoing funding, maybe a management level, county level management, that the state would have bore the cost had the penalties not been changed from felonies to misdemeanors, and AP&P would have managed. Now the counties are managing. But what I'm hearing from local purse string holders, commissioners, and even some mayors in that is they're worried. And we heard this somewhat with Commissioner Hansen with IDC, and I know there were other factors, but they're saying, you know, you guys are really good coming in with a couple years worth of money and then being gone. And we know that if the program is popular with our community or our service providers, they're going to demand that we find money to fill it. And yet it makes us question, do we even want to get in bed with you guys? Because, you know, are we taking on a financial burden that we don't know that we can handle? This is a big issue in my mind. And I agree with I've never understood, and this may be where we do with the strategic planning is, are we, in my mind, I could see a place where we are funding a certain level of indigent defense across the state ongoing. And that's the battle we fight every year. And then there's the argument that we just stand up programs and then we get out or do other things on top of that. I do think we need to have a better understanding, because if it's the first and we're going to fund a certain level ongoing, that makes me want to limit how many new things to go into until we get it expanded more fully across the state. But if not, then there's a good argument that you build up the programs as best you can with the funding that's available, knowing that it might be gone. If that makes sense, that's what makes it hard for me when we start doing the money piece, is I just don't know what we're exactly doing.
Thank you. Michael Zimmerman.
Yeah, I mean, Michael raises an issue which, of course, from the beginning has been a problem for us. With the grant system, where we have to entice people to come on board. And as soon as we start cutting people loose, other people are not gonna join in. On the other hand, we don't have enough money. And probably don't have the prospect of enough money to both improve existing systems and add new systems in. So I guess in our strategic planning, one of the things that it seems to me is a hard choice, but one we need to be thinking about, is first appearances are probably more critical to more people than improvements in, and I see Ben shaking his head, but improvements in more sophisticated provision for fewer defendants. I mean, how are we going to make these trades? I think our whole system is set up. I realize the grant system is set up and we've run it along trying to entice people in and develop a local culture that's more supportive. But as Tom's saying, and I think it's the other side of what Michael's saying, as soon as we start pulling back, all those concerns of the local commissioners are going to come to play, and we're not going to be supported by local county attorneys who are saying, oh yeah, keep applying for those grants. Hard.
You know, one other thing that helps county commissions and councils is just, everyone knows this, you all know this too, but the steadiness of budgets and the steadiness of expenses, right? And I mentioned this earlier today too, that I would say there's more commissioners and council members who have some finance and budget experience, or they certainly get that as on the job, because you must. But yeah, even our elected clerk auditor and managing defender was so wary about participating and receiving a chunk that then they would be responsible when that chunk goes away. Because there's even Davis County every year, millions of dollars of requests for funds into the departments and the different programs than we have revenue for every year. And so to get, a nice chunk, but to have to worry into the future about how to make up that difference if it goes away, I'm certain causes every single county or jurisdiction, some pause. So
This is Pam. I didn't put up my hand. Sorry. Can I say something?
Oh, yeah, go.
I mean, I guess I know we've struggled with this issue and, but to me, we're also not talking about, and Tom, you kind of hit on some of this, but what we're still doing is subsidizing a state obligation through grant dollars to counties and cities, but then we're letting them know, but it might not always be there, even though it really isn't your obligation. So, I mean, it's kind of one of those things where I think is a part of our strategic plan, like how much of our strategic plan should be with the legislature, to Tom's point about now that you've funded it, you are going to be responsible for funding it. Because quite frankly, you should have been funding it all along. And so, I mean, I realize we're not there with the legislature yet. And so we've also got to struggle with counties and things like that. But, and understanding, Lorraine's point that, because one of the things I see that is happening through the work that we're doing, even in Salt Lake County, where I feel like we have a county council and a department that is very supportive of indigent defense and has been an advocate for us in a lot of ways. And just even in the couple of years in working with the IDC, and I think Rich could probably say this, there's a lot that has changed at the county level, at Salt Lake County, about that, and advocating and getting more on board with talking about and raising issues with surrounding like parity of pay and additional resources for defense resources and caseloads and other types of things. And I think that, so I mean, I think that we are having an impact on those counties that are implementing defense management systems, getting more and more educated. To your point, Lorraine, county councils getting more and more educated about what indigent defense resources go to and the importance of them and why they're there. And so anyway, I just want to say, when we're talking about the issue of letting the counties know it might not always be there, we really can't forget that what we really need to be charged with and also be really focused on is working with the legislature to say, you can't continue to push off this obligation without some type of a permanent investment. Whether that's a whole, you invest and pay for the whole thing, or you at least commit to some type of a formula with it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Educating the legislature. Think about the turnover in the House. So always and forever, right? And how many people understand who are working in that service role. Mary. Hang on.
Sorry, just kind of following up on what was just said. I am mindful that every legislative type body, whether it's at the county or the state level or the city level, has extraordinary pressure all the time from people who want money expended on various programs. In my mind, the difference here is that no one has a Bill of Rights right to have a park in their neighborhood or new striping down the middle of the street. And every one of these defendants has an absolute constitutional right to competent and effective assistance of counsel. And that for me is a bright line distinction. I know that probably isn't much help when people are facing down angry constituents, and I'm appreciative of that. And so, as has just been said, we need to continue the education constantly about the importance of this.
Yeah, thank you. Any other commissioner comment to this point? Kind of looking through.
Just add one. So it sounds like as I listen to all this and again, if we in our strategic planning come up with what we think might be the better path, and then we go to legislature, I do agree that there's a state piece of this that should be an ongoing funding need. And with that in mind, I think that if I'm a legislator, and I think that IDC has built a more robust system than we are willing to pay for, maybe a little bit to Judge Zimmerman's comments, everyone should have competent indigent defense. And certainly there's more critical times than others. And there's other resources that would be very helpful. But if we are going to make a push at having the legislature recognize that they have a funding obligation that's ongoing, these aren't grants, which is what it's probably going to take to get some of our counties that haven't joined to join in, knowing that the funding isn't just going to go away after 1 or 2 years, then we probably need to at least be mindful of how much cost we build into it. A $500,000 system for a county that we build into an 800,000 because we're adding a lot of programming is wonderful and needed. But is that what's going to get us the ongoing funding, or do we do ongoing funding with a certain level of service? And then there's grants that fund additional things. That's what I think will be important for us to talk about in our meetings, and then the legislature as a whole and the governor.
Thank you. Michael Zimmerman.
Yeah, I wonder, picking up on what Tom's saying and what else has been voiced here, if we shouldn't, this is a sort of a tactical approach, but if we shouldn't think of the most appealing case to be made for the most number of people having minimum constitutional defense, absolute bare minimum, and ask the legislature to take that on statewide in every court. Is it first appearance? I mean, I don't know, but if 85% of the people showing up in the courts, something like that, are entitled to indigent defense, that's a big constituency. And if they're getting essentially nothing, it's probably not sexy, but managing defenders aren't sexy either.
I beg to differ as a man. No, I'm totally joking. I'm totally joking.
I saw that
Point
coming.
taken. But I mean, to Tom's point, that how do we get them to, how do we make a case for a minimum, a minimum state obligation, even though we know the state has the whole obligation, but how do we make a case for a minimum budget for every county that then gets added on to? Because if there's any way you're gonna, I suppose, sophisticated counties about applying for grants and putting pressure on legislators, it would be to have them have some money from the state that has to be applied to a certain place, and then whoever the council are going to be asking for more, or they're going to be telling the county they need something different. I just put that out there.
And it causes me to think about all of the changes from the COVID disruption and how so many things went virtual. And now there's, as I understand it, things that never happened in the courts virtually now successfully happen in the courts virtually. I think there's an opportunity for us to, as a state, to figure that out. You know, how can we do this well, and where can we find efficiencies after what we've just experienced? Pam, did you have another comment?
Yeah, well, I was just going to follow up on Justice Zimmerman's point. I think something to that effect is imperative, I think, with the legislature, particularly after watching what went on, like in the conversations regarding bail, right? Like so much of that conversation shifted, and I was very minimally involved in it because we don't deal with bail in juvenile court. So I tried to dodge that bullet, but it seemed like so much of that conversation shifted from, you know, how should we be looking at who needs to be detained and who should be released and assessing risk, to how many people are tricking the system and getting an attorney for free. And so now we've created a law that passes on to a county a financial obligation to audit their indigent defense system instead of a conversation. And I know Tom and Rich and other people that are on this call were more, and Michael, involved in the bail conversations. And I know the issue of first appearance got brought up and things like that. But I think that it is an important conversation, because I'm worried that the conversation with the legislature is focusing and reshifting on something that's like spend a lot of money to catch a little bit, but not address the fact that what we really need is counsel for people. So tirade finished now.
Well, I think, and in the very short time that I've been there, I see these, questions and themes and concerns presenting themselves. And I know that that's something that's been going on since the creation of the commission. How do we address these different needs? And so I think that the timing of the strategic planning process, it couldn't come soon enough. And I know that we're gonna spend a lot of time grappling with these bigger questions. And I'm hopeful that having that designated time and space and the facilitator involved with that too will help us to kind of work through some of these bigger questions and have that to help us guide how we move forward as a commission and how we address these funding questions. And with all that in mind, and so that's why with this tiered proposal that we have, that's why we relied on the discussion from last year to guide that, knowing that we have the strategic planning session coming up that may very well, lead us to something completely different than what we have proposed here today. So we want to recognize that this is not something that we are proposing for, the next 5 years, the next 3 years even. This is a proposal that we are presenting just for the upcoming fiscal year. There are some time constraints where we do need to get engaged with our partners out there to let them know this is where our priorities are, and this is what they can expect when they engage with us for these requests. But I know we all are looking forward to having that strategic planning process to address the longer term direction of the IDC and how we can help with the indigent defense throughout the state.
Thank you, Matt. So are you wanting then for us to say that looks fine, continue on? Or
that would be nice, yes.
Yeah, if no one else has anything, and people can nod or whatever you want, but it seems like that, yeah, there's a thumbs up. You could always do a thumbs up if you've learned how to find those little pieces in the Zoom. Yeah, I think it sounds good to me with what we know right now. And I see Mary nodding. And Michael, did you have another question, Michael Drexel?
I'd just make one recommendation, and that is, maybe I'm wrong about this. I'm happy to be wrong about it, but it seems like Tier 2A is more closely related to Tier 3 than it is Tier 2 in terms of additional resources for particular counties. And so it may be that you have Tier 1, Tier 2, and then Tier 3A and 3B as it relates to specialized attorneys and social workers and the other things, both for those that are playing ball and those that aren't.
Yeah, I can kind of see that. Rich Morrow, did you want to say something to that?
Yeah, but I think in terms of priority, I think the idea behind putting it in Tier 2 is to sort of equalize a little bit, because I do think that there are a number of areas in Tier 2A that I think should probably garner some priority. And Michael has hit on it several times, and that's first appearance. I sort of see, especially after the bail debate, I sort of see first appearance as a highly valuable resource for us and something that we should consider prioritizing and funding. And I really do see that as 2A funding. And so I think I would like to, my preference would be to equate that with whatever else is in 2, even the managing defender, because I do think that has the potential of really impacting a lot more people and protecting the rights of a lot more people, even in the area of first appearance.
I think Margaret hoped to look at that slide one more time, yes?
Let me get that back up here.
I just want to make sure I'm completely straight in my head.
Which slide was that?
Just the tier definition
Okay.
slide. I'm too lazy to like pull it, up from other places.
I might have closed it. Give me a second. I'll get
That's
it back.
okay. Don't worry about it. It's all right. I mean, I think I just, if I remember right, in 2A, there was also some mention of juvenile specific, I think, managing type positions.
Let's see here.
Sorry, Matt.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know what people can see here. Let me see.
We are still just looking at vote list, your last slide, I think.
Okay. There we go.
There you go. There, yeah. Here.
The tier 3 that you wanted to see? Or
It was the 2 and 2A.
okay, go back there. So there's 2A. And then here is 2.
Okay, great. Perfect. That's what, thank you.
Is that the juvenile court, the juvenile system?
I just couldn't remember if it was 2 or 2A, so. Because I do see a definite need in places for that. Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Good. You think you have what you need, Matt, from us?
Well, hold on, let me exit here so I can see faces again.
Like Joanna said, it's a big job to lead a group of attorneys and people with a lot of experience and opinions. And a good ideas, honestly. I appreciate the way people bring up various different ideas.
So I'll leave it to the group. We can either approve it with these recommendations as far as some of the language changes. I think for clarity, it might make sense to come back next commission meeting and incorporate those changes and then just have a final up or down vote on that, just so that there aren't any lingering questions about what was discussed here today. Does that sound appropriate?
That sounds good to me. Tom, did you have something?
Yeah, just so I think, Matt, you brought up a good point, and certainly if we go even with a strategic planning session, and I could foresee us, and hopefully this is a part of the direction we'll go, I could see us going forward to the legislature for the following year, having a ongoing funding for a certain level, which could be tier 1, maybe it's tier 2. And so this is valuable work because I think we could use it even if we change it a little bit. And then maybe having grant funding a part of it as well to do additional things so that we build in some consistency. My biggest thing is at what point do you need us? I would really rather not do much until we know whether the increase in funding we're getting. And I still think that the way you've structured it is probably how it's likely going to go, or something similar to that. for this next year. Maybe the strategic plan will say differently and we can always change it. But in my mind, it will be easier doing this if I know we're getting the increased funding. If that's not coming through, I would want to dial it back even a little bit more.
So my understanding, and to answer that question, is that in order for the grants to be underway and to be in place for the fiscal year, we need to get started on that pretty quickly. And so waiting until the end of the session, I don't think gives enough time to put those in place. Greg, unfortunately, well, fortunately for him, he's in the happiest place on earth right now, probably wearing some mouse ears. So I can't speak to the specifics, but in prior staff meetings, there was a need to have this sorted out by the end of the calendar year so that he could get going and get his work done in order to get the funding in place and funding out there.
Yeah, I remember that too. It's all kind of on a timeline, huh, that we need to stay on top of.
Yeah, that's helpful.
All right, that's a lot of great discussion. Thank you for presenting it. And it sounds like if you want to just incorporate a couple of those little things and present it at the next meeting. And Brian, did you have another comment?
I was just going to say, I think that how we've approached it in the past is kind of two separate things. One is how much money will we have to award once we know that. Two is how we're going to prioritize those awards and give the grantees an expectation of how we're prioritizing them. Because in the first few years, we didn't have a criteria. So we were kind of figuring it out as we went along. Now we wanted to get our criteria out there. They can make their applications subject to the criteria, be rated in their application. And then if we have more money, we can give out more. If we have less, we can give out less.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. And it seems to me, as I recall, a lot of that system evaluation happens at the very beginning of the year too, which is all really valuable work, right? And then that plays in also before we give the grant application information to the systems. Okay, well, if you got what you need, Matt and others, then we'll move on to the next agenda item. Is that okay? All right. So what we have left, and I want to be really good with everybody's time to finish at by 4, but we have 5, 6, and 7 on the agenda. So the appellate update from Deborah Nelson, and core principles on that. And then the Beaver County update from Matt, and then the last strategic planning update so that everybody can, and obviously we are pretty excited about that and want to make sure everybody knows what we've talked about so far just a little bit. So let's go in that order. And Deborah, go ahead.
Thank you. And luckily mine will just take a few minutes, hopefully. A copy of IAD's proposed core principles has been provided. But I first want to start by that my chief deputy, Ben Miller, should be credited for taking this difficult project on and drafting these core principles for our new agency. Ben has successfully encapsulated IAD's vision of where the bar should be set for those providing indigent appellate defense services in the state, and hopefully reflects the commission's vision as well. This has been a thoughtful process that reflects IAD's dedication to appellate defense and our commitment to provide each of our clients with quality, compassionate, and effective representation as is required by both the state and federal constitutions. And it puts everyone on notice of what we expect of ourselves and our contract attorneys when representing one of IAD's clients. So we are hopeful that these core principles that we've been working on for a while will be approved by this commission.
Wonderful. Then do we need to take action on this? Looking to staff. We need to have an official acceptance and vote on this.
Yes, that's what I understand.
Okay, yeah, first of all, Ryan, you might have a hand up to this point, to this agenda item, and any other questions of commissioners. Let's have those now.
Sorry, that was a previous hand.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, it looks fantastic. I have read over it, and well done, Ben and Deborah in the team. Anyone have any particular questions? If not, then I will entertain a motion.
This is Pam. I'll make a motion to approve the core principles.
This is Ryan. I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion to the motion? All right, then let's go ahead and take a roll call vote. And I think I can see everybody on the screen well enough to go around. Tom?
Yes.
Okay. And let's see, Margaret?
Yes.
Great. Michael Drexel?
Sorry, couldn't find the button. Yes.
Great. Mary?
Yes.
Michael Zimmerman?
Yes.
Great. And Rich Morrow?
I
think that was an aye, and I am also an aye. So I don't think we have any opposed, unanimous acceptance of that, the core principle document. Thank you so much for your work on that.
Thank you. And thank you to Ben, especially. I mean, he is responsible for this. So thank you, Ben.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. You haven't even been with us very long, have you?
Just since July.
Summer.
That's some good work, fast work in the government. Good for you. All right, wonderful, thank you. Let's see, the next item is Matt's to give us a Beaver County update.
Okay, well, I have some news on Beaver County. So I was contacted by Shane Manueli, who's our managing defender out of Iron County. And if you recall, we had thought that Beaver County was on board to partner with us, and then received a very brief response when we had been pestering them to sign some paperwork that they were no longer interested. They have since reconsidered, and the background on that is that they have a contract attorney there. His contract is up, and he has indicated that that he's not interested in renewing under the terms of their contract. Basically, that contract was not very competitive with others throughout the state. And so the commissioners there in Beaver County reached out to Shane to say, hey, can we still get in on this? And so he approached us to see if we could re-engage with them. And what he has proposed is that, so originally the original grant with them was that we would fund the shared parental defense contract between Beaver and Kane County. Now Shane tells me that he's been having a hard time finding any attorney to fill that particular role. And so what he is proposing is that we modify the agreements so that we take the parental defense money and we use that to add to the primary defender contract out of Beaver County to bring that more in line with what's competitive throughout the region. Additionally, the Kane County attorney contract there, that is also below what other contracts are paid in the region. So in addition to supplementing the contract out of Beaver County, the proposal would be to modify the contract to supplement the primary defender contract in Kane County. And so that would make that contract more competitive. And then the remaining funds that had been earmarked for the parental defense position would be used for defense resources in those systems.
Okay.
So
kind of discussion about that?
comments or questions about that?
Yeah.
Well, that's good news. They're back in or interested. So yay.
Yeah. And
And I may have missed it, but go ahead, Matt.
I was going to say it's easier to remember that we would have 20 counties participating rather than the 19. It just is a nice round number. I like it.
It's a Spinal Tap moment where it's one more, right? Maybe I missed it, but what's your impression, Matt? I mean, does this make sense? Is this a good thing for us to do as it's been proposed? What guidance or input can you give us in terms of your opinion?
Yeah, I do. I think it's a good development, and I think it can add to the momentum that we are seeing in that region. And the prior contract out of Beaver County, it was the contract amount by that system was $65,000 for the primary defender, which I can see would be not very attractive to attorneys in that area. And there, frankly, just are not a lot of attorneys in some of those counties that can do the work or that are available to do the work. So if that's going to make it more competitive, then I think that's definitely something that we can feel good about investing in.
Matt, will they just kind of incorporate the child welfare work then within those two contracts?
Yes, that's what's happening in some of the smaller counties, is that the primary defender does those as well. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Adam, but that's my understanding.
Michael Zimmerman and then Tom, you guys have something as well?
No, I didn't have anything. I was going to ask the same question Michael Drexel asked. Great.
And Tom?
Yes, Matt, this number one, I appreciate that your team and Shane, I mean, Shane got involved. I would want to support it if for no other reason for this alone, as long as it wasn't crazy numbers. We're going to have to be a little flexible with some of these counties to making these things work. They're not used to, and they're going to want to feel like they're directing some of this. And the fact that Shane got in there, came up with I think a very good outcome. Beaver's back in, and Kane is benefiting. I think it's worth supporting. And as long as we have some controls in place, I think some flexibility is going to be needed as we go forward. So I actually applaud it, and I think that you're spot on, and I'm really glad that Shane jumped into and helped out.
I agree. And we are, the reality is we are facing attorney shortages. I mean, I'm running up against that right now. Losing a juvenile contract provider in San Pete, in Juab, one in Utah County. You know, suddenly that's 3 contracts that I've got to try and figure out, and how to get that work covered.
Wow, yeah, that's tricky. Yeah, I know. I think it's good news. Looks like everyone agrees.
Do we need a motion or on it, or because I'd be happy to make one?
I don't know. Is that Matt, do we? Okay. Go ahead, Tom.
I make a motion that we approve the recommendation being made, or the proposal made to allow for the Beaver contract and Kane contracts to move forward.
I second.
Okay, second by Michael Zimmerman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I,
Looks like a unanimous approval. Very good. Nice. Good news. And I, guess what? I have finally learned how to say Shane's last name, I believe. We'll have to review it in our minds. It's Manuele, I think. It's tricky. Manuele. Anyway, good luck. Keep practicing that one.
Now you're messing me up, because there's like 3 versions now. I don't even know what to call him. So Shane's just gonna have to work.
It's harder than Kamalu, so that's why I was Manuele, quite a name. Okay, so let's see, number 7, I'm excited for everybody here, the strategic planning update. We've got Matt and Rich to share about that.
Yeah, so we did have the subcommittee meeting where we got together to, well, I guess it's just a committee. It's not a subcommittee, a committee meeting where we discussed priorities and timelines and how we want this strategic planning to look. The consensus was that it would be worth it to have a facilitator there to lead the discussion. And the consensus as well was to have, rather than breaking it up into small chunks, just to dig in and spend some time together to sort through some of these big questions on where we go in the next 5 to 10 years. Another part of the discussion was we tasked, well, I think he volunteered, Rich volunteered to reach out to some of his connections in the public defense arena nationwide to see if we could identify an ideal candidate to do that facilitation. We thought it was really valuable to have somebody who was well-versed in indigent defense issues and might have some background in the unique challenges that we're facing. And so, Rich, if you could share where we're at with that.
Sure, thanks, Matt. So I reached out to the engagement director at the National Association of Public Defenders and gave her a brief overview of what we're looking for. She suggested 4 names, a person named Paul DeWolf, who's the public defender in the state of Maryland, 2 people in Kentucky, one named Ernie Lewis, another named Ed Monahan, both of whom were founding members of the National Association of Public Defenders. They were also directors of their agency in the state of Kentucky. And a 3rd person named Phyllis Subban, who the engagement director, whose name is Heather Hall, has worked with directly on some facilitation and some strategic planning. She did some strategic planning for the system in the state of Louisiana. She was also Phyllis Subban is also was the former director of the statewide office in New Mexico. And while New Mexico is a statewide system that's funded by the legislature, they're very similar to us, both geographically, obviously, rural and urban settings, full-time public defender offices, and contract attorneys. So they have a similar system to us. So I reached out to Phyllis. Phyllis wrote me back and would like to meet with a small group of us, 1, 2, 3, 4 of us, to think about what are our goals, what's the time frame we're looking at, what are we hoping to achieve. So I think she's not yet agreed to do this, but I think it sounds like she wants to get some more information from us, and I think would be amenable to working with us because she's done this sort of thing before with at least one state that I'm aware of. So she sounds like she'd be a good candidate. So I wrote her back, indicated that we would maybe have a Zoom meeting with a small group of people to discuss further next steps, timeframes, things like that. So she sounds like a good candidate to me.
Yeah, I see heads nodding. Wow. Pretty cool. Yeah, happy to have her meet with 1, 2, 3, however many. Just maybe the staff can help us to set that up virtually. Yeah. Yeah, that sounds.
Yeah, I suggested to her some kind of a Zoom meeting with us. And so she's amenable to that. And the only thing we need to do is coordinate with her schedule. I indicated to her that we would be having this meeting today, and that our commission would be meeting, and we would have maybe a little bit, and it sounds like we do have quite a bit more direction that we would be thinking about to put in for the agenda for a strategic plan.
That's great. That is great news. Does anyone else have a question or input about the plan for the strategic plan?
Just caution from the procurement point of view that we need to be very careful about not prejudicing the process and following the procurement rules as far as contacting people and how much communication we have with them, so that the process can be impartial.
Rich, do we have on that line, do we have a sense of how much it would cost?
Haven't asked those questions yet. In my email, I just indicated that, their costs would be covered and things like that. We haven't had a discussion about a fee, if there is a fee. I don't know that she would charge a fee, but I mean, certainly that's a topic of discussion that I think we would need to have with her.
Because I'm trying to remember, what's the limit for having to do an RFP, the state?
$1,000.
Okay,
So
yeah.
Matt and I had talked about this, and we had talked about a possible budget between $5,000 to $10,000 for the whole process as a possibility.
And so this is Tom, so Katrina, if you've got the knowledge and experience to help us work through this, then that's fine. If you don't, or if somebody doesn't at IDC, we could certainly pull in somebody from state purchasing to just give us guidelines and making sure that we follow in. It's unfortunate if it's that low a number. It's kind of sad. And I've heard conversations. I know it's a lower number. It shouldn't be as low a number as it is. There's some things that we ought to be able to do just to get business done and not have to do multiple or do formal RFPs and contracts. But if that's what it is, that's what it is. And there may be some talk going around about raising that number up, but that's not going to happen before we do this. And if it even happens at all. So are you comfortable enough doing that, or do we need somebody to connect in?
If you're paying over $1,000, then purchasing has to be involved.
And then would you be reaching out to them and through staff at IDC? I'll just let you know, if you need any help from us at CCJJ, reach out and I'll be happy to connect people. Otherwise, you guys probably do just fine with it.
But we can, even if we do an RFP, we can give purchasing names of people that we would like them to notify that the RFP is open so that they can respond to it. Or if we really have somebody that we absolutely want to have do it, then I guess a sole source contract would be a possibility as well.
I think I would suggest just looking at what the sole source side, instead of having to do what we're doing. It could take just a lot more effort, and then we get whoever, we still don't have to pick the cheapest, but it just, I don't know, if we could do it on a sole source, if it would meet the guidelines. I think
yes, it debate. We set the budget, then we set the budget, and the contractors would just know the budget ahead of time, what we are willing to pay. Or we can leave it up open to some degree, and then cost would be a consideration in the selection process. So we can go either way.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah, great discussion. And I thanks Katrina for making sure that we do it right with the process that's required. Ryan is happy to work on the purchasing side with Katrina and state purchasing. He's happy to help. I'm certain he has some good experience for that. I mean, in my mind, since she does not do this professionally to be a facilitator, and we don't know if she would charge or what she would charge. It might even be under the 1,000, but to kind of move through it in the right way for the state, I think is important. So yeah, Ryan, that'd be great. Katrina, is that good for Ryan to visit with you? And and help us know how to take the next step on that. That'd be great. And just, you can let me know, or
We've also talked about, Matt and I were talking about the fact that that facilitator probably wants to do some research or some kind of prep work before the facilitation sessions take place. So that would be part of the contract as well. And so we were thinking of looking at the contract we had with RAND Corporation for doing the study that they did and kind of seeing what was involved in that and how much money was involved, just to get maybe an idea of what might be involved in this particular process. And that it would probably involve perhaps 2 6-hour days of in-person meetings, and then the prep work, and then the kind of finishing the project. So
yeah,
so that's why we're thinking of a budget of $5,000 to $10,000, because it involves a lot of other work besides just the facilitation of the meeting itself.
yeah, and it's good for all
And
commissioners.
possibly travel if we do it in person. I mean, or it could be by Zoom, but those are considerations.
Yeah, you're right. I hope that we can do that in person. I hope she can come here and that we can gather in person. I think that would be ideal. And let's see. Oh, and yes, for sure. We talked in the small group that it will likely take 2 sessions for this effort. And I think people also thought the timing of this would be great if it were in January. Am I remembering that correctly? Oh, Matt looks very surprised. Oh, maybe you were thinking later. Never mind. Oh, yes, it's government. Okay.
So the timeline that we talked about would be that we would do the RFP, open that perhaps in January, and select whoever will be doing it by February, and then take February, March to plan the, prep work for the facilitation, and then have the actual sessions in April after the session is over.
After the session, that's right. You're refreshing me. That's
why I phase by the end of May.
Yeah, you're right. That is correct. All right, well, good. Does everybody kind of understand that then? Any questions or other input on the strategic plan? Thanks to those who put heads together, that little group that kind of hashed through some ideas. That was super helpful. Great. Well, thanks, Katrina and Matt. And especially Rich. Thank you for kind of using your connections to figure out some.
If you could email me and Matt those names that you suggested, that would be very helpful.
Rich emailing. Okay, yeah, that's great. He's saying yes. Good.
And any contact information you have with them, that would be helpful.
And lots of thank yous in the chat to Rich. Thank you. Okay. Wow. There we go. It's 3:57. We have been very timely and lots of great discussion. Is there any other business that anyone would like to bring up at the close of this meeting? I'm not seeing anything. Is there a score on the soccer game?
There is. BYU is up 4-1 with under 4 minutes to play, and your neighbor Colan has 3 goals.
She's amazing. And Olivia Wade will probably score before the game ends. Here's my prediction. I would place a bet if I were a betting woman. All right, good. Did anyone figure out where I've been for my meeting? Did you hear hair dryers in the background or music? My haircut is coming up at 4 o'clock and I didn't have time to drive. So they found me a space.
That's awesome.
Lorene, I was gonna guess a police interrogation room.
There's occasional Air Force jets, there's laughing out there and dryers, hair dryers. I just tried to mute, except for the time that I'm in.
No, Rich, her hands are free.
Get your nails
so-
done while you were doing it.
Yeah, there's so many things. I'm in a room where I'm supposed to have a massage, but I'm not having a massage right now.
See, I thought you were in a CVS bathroom, so I'm glad that you found a better utility than a CVS bathroom.
I made sure it was a blank white wall, so there would be lots of questions. All right, you guys are amazing. Thank you so much, everyone. See you later.
Thank you.
I move we adjourn.
Oh, thank you.
Second.
All right, Ryan motion and Michael seconded. All in favor? Aye. Great.
Aye.
Thank you,
Aye.
everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.